Hello and welcome to EV Nick. This is my YouTube channel all about electric cars. I'd like to welcome Transition Bollington, Matt Harris, who's joining me on the live today. He'll be looking at all your questions in the chat. We have some pre-submitted questions from Transition Bollington. Transition Bollington is a local environmental based group. There'll be one in your local area. If you're not in Bollington, there's ones all over the place. There's one local to me, which is Transition Buxton. So if you have a look at your local area, there will be lots of local environmental groups. And I've invited them. I was supposed to do a talk all about my John O'Groats to Land's End trip, which I was supposed to be doing in May, which we've decided to cancel for the time being, just postpone why all this is going on I'm not going to talk about it, so we won't mention it today, but with what's going on. I'd like to welcome Matt to the chat, who will be reading the questions. Hello, Matt. Say hello to everyone.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us on, Nick, and doing this talk instead of doing it in person. So I hope there's some.
Well, I couldn't have really turned up, even if the lockdown does disappear next month. I can't really do a talk about doing John O'Groats to Land's End if I've not done it. So on the side, you've got this chat for everyone here. If anyone's got any questions during the discussion here, please just type it in the chat. Me and Matt will try and get to it. Matt will mainly be looking at the chat. I'm trying to control the cameras here and sort of flick between me and Matt, and also keep an eye on the chat if I can. But mainly Matt will be reading out the questions, and I will try and give the best answers. So if you've got any questions on electric vehicles, anything that you want to ask, just pop it in the chat anyway through the chat, and we'll try and get to it. If you've got a question that you want to save to the end, then we'll try and bring to the end. But we have got some pre-made questions, I believe, Matt.
We do. Shall we get started?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So yeah, we've got a list of questions from a number of the Transition Bollington members and people in Bollington. So I think the first one's from Lynn, and she's asked, how does a town like Bollington get the infrastructure in place? Because she lives in a terraced house. So can someone in a terraced house, living in a narrow street, get an EV? What needs to happen for them to?
Dual answer. So it's going to depend on if she can park on a street. So let's just say she can park on a street. You can have lamppost chargers. That's one solution that you can use. You can also have pop-up chargers that pop out of the ground, lift up. There's a couple of options there if she can't park. She's got street parking, but if she hasn't got street parking and she's relying on, say, just parking somewhere near a house, then there's a thing that you can do called hubs. So a lot of towns, especially in Scotland are quite pro EV. They sort of what they call charging hubs. So they'll just be places near your place of work or where you go shopping or near motorway service stations, which are just basically like a petrol station forecourt with, say, 7 or 8 chargers that you park your car at, and some are fast, some are slow, some are super rapid, and you just charge your car there. But if she's got on-site street parking, there is actually because I believe the second part of the question was how would you get as a council grants towards this, and there's a grant that the local government can apply from the central government for on-street parking. So there is government funding there. The local council has to pay some of the cost, but there is central government funding to cover quite a majority of it. So if they're willing to invest in it, there is. And there's also a couple of private companies that are sort of crowdfunding to fit these. One contacted me not long ago, which is where all the local people would put money in a pot to crowdfund it. They'd all put the infrastructure in, and then as the scheme starts making money for charging for these charges to be put in, because people will be charged for electricity, they'll start refunding the members. So a bit like you have community projects for, say, corkscrews for electricity generation, that they're doing the same with chargers.
Mm-hmm. And are you allowed to run extension leads out of your window across the pavement?
No, really, no, not really. If you own the land, then yes. But if you don't own the land and the pavement, and someone trips over that, you're liable to being sued. But I've seen people. You can fit. There's a couple of councils which allow you to dig up the part of your pavement, and you can fit like a trunch, so an actual trunch that the whole cable would run through. So you just pass your cable through this hole underneath your pavement, and you can use one of them because no one can trip over it because it's all hidden. But to be
Okay.
honest, the better solution would be either lamppost chargers or chargers that they they look like there's no charger on the pavement, and then they levitate out of the ground.
Ah,
So you
sounds
can
cool.
get them. Yeah, they're quite nice because you during the day they'd all be down and sunk, so you just walk over it, cycle over it. No one would know they're there. And then when you come home at night, you'd press like a fob on a key, and it would just raise out of the ground and appear.
And the lamppost chargers, they just use the same power that's already there.
Yeah, so
For,
all lampposts now are obviously being converted to LEDs from the traditional halogens. So there's now a little bit of a surplus on those basically electrics that are in that lamppost. There's a little bit of a surplus, and you can tap off that and charge your car. Now it's not fast. It's not very very quick. It's slow. It's a slower charger, but if you're parking at home at night, you're going to be there for 12 hours. Say
yeah.
you get home from work at 6 and you get back up at 6, it's going to be charged for at least 12 hours. So it's usually plenty to get to work. And most EVs will fully charge on that, but your bigger sort of Tesla size 100 kilowatt hour batteries won't.
Okay. There's a question there, it's quite similar, saying from Kevin Kelly, saying, is it okay to keep charging at home, or do you need to rapid charge every so often? So that would apply if you are got these slow chargers. Do you need to do a rapid charge at
No,
all?
you don't. You don't ever need to rapid charge. You can rapid charge if you want to, but you don't have to. There was a bit of a myth going around that if you rapid charge more, it can clean the plates on the cell batteries. But I'd have to double check with my friend Ewan, who's a battery chemist, Dr. Ewan McTurk. But as far as I know, I don't think there's any research that's proved that it dramatically improves battery
Oh,
life.
okay.
And to be honest, even if you slow charge your battery all the time, the batteries are lasting far, far longer than most people ever predicted they would.
Interesting. Okay.
Have you got that link? By the way,
Yeah.
there should be a link for that government publication for the resident street charging.
Okay.
If you want to put it in the chat for
Yeah.
everyone, and then everyone can jump over to that link.
Okay.
I'll just have a quick look at the chat. Who we got on here? So, hello Victor. He's one of my patrons. So, hi Victor. You okay? Hello to John Peake, and hello there to Andrew. Let's have a quick look. Who else have we got in here? We got Roger Bradley. How many local? Have we got anyone here from Transition Bollington in the chat, or anyone who is from another transition group locally in the chat? Just let us know.
There's certainly some from Bollington there. We've got Andrew Melville, Ruth Tams, John Peake, John Place. So yeah, definitely some good turnout.
Yeah, that's good. And we got any other questions? I believe we got a question for. Is it Ruth who's asked that question? Is it Ruth Tams that's got the pre-made question?
Yeah,
I've got in
there's
front of
another
me?
one from Lynn. As a consumer, is it better cost-wise to lease an EV or buy one, knowing that part of the cost will be replacing the batteries?
Okay, so buying or leasing the car, completely up to you. So whichever's better financially. I'm a person that likes to buy or finance the car and own it outright. If you're someone that likes to look at monthly costs and have a new car every couple of years, then leasing's a great option as well. If you're thinking of changing your EV for one with a bigger battery when there's bigger batteries out, then leasing's a good option because it keeps you rolling along. A second part of the question about the cost of replacing batteries. I don't know anyone who's ever had a EV battery replaced for it being old. I know one or two that have failed due to an actual physical manufacturing failure, but they've been done under warranty because there was a physical problem. Just like you have a problem you can have a problem with an engine. They were faulty from the factory, so they got replaced, immediately. But EV batteries are the big myth is they're not like one of these. They're not a mobile phone. EV batteries and chemistry and the way they're looked after is completely different. So a mobile phone, you charge it from 0% to 100%, and you do that. Most people do it every day, charge it up every day. charging a lithium-ion battery, which is the same type of batteries that are in an EV, but slightly different chemistry to a mobile phone. EVs and batteries, all batteries, do not like going from 0 to 100. So, to 100%. They don't like that. They don't like being held at 100, and they don't like being held at 0. And they can actually go below 0, which is what damages a battery. So the only two things that damage a battery is going below 0 and holding a high percentage of 100. Electric car batteries have a thing called what you call a BMS system, which is battery management system. And what the battery does is it never lets you get to here, which is 0. It never lets you get to 0. It locks it out. Now it might say to you 0% on your dash. It might say 0, but 0 is not actually 0. It's more like 6%. And when it says 100, it's not 100%. Again, it's locked out in the BMS system. 100% is more like 94%. So they lock out the top and they lock out the bottom. And by doing that, you're never fully discharging and you're never fully charging your battery. And because you're never fully charging and you're never fully discharging, you don't get battery degradation. It doesn't wear out and it lasts a lot longer. So on my drive at the moment, I've got the wife's Renault Zoe. That's a 22 kilowatt hour battery, one of the very, very first electric cars produced by Renault. That's done 30,000 miles. It's 22 kilowatt hour battery is very, very small. The new Zoe is 52 kilowatt hours, for example. It's a 2015 plate car. It's done 30,000 miles, and its original health of the battery when it came out of the factory is obviously 100%. It's now on 97% from a 2015. So it's 5 years old, and it's only lost 4%. And as batteries get older, the rate they slow down also slows down. So
which compared to a phone battery in 5 years is terrible. Yeah, exactly.
So I've only lost 4% of my battery's capacity. Now, if you look at that in terms of range, 4%, and the car in four, if you think it does 100 miles on a full charge, it's lost 4%. You've not really lost much.
That's interesting. There's on that point of, because you said batteries, you've not seen a battery which has failed other than it being a fault.
Yeah.
We've got a question. I'll jump back to Ruth's question in a minute. So it's about recycling batteries at end of life, or if you have an accident, let's say. Is there a facility or provision in the UK? That's a question from Ches, to recycle batteries in EVs, which I guess would happen when they eventually die.
Right. So two parts of the question then. So yes, there is ways of recycling them. So at the moment, most batteries when they've been written off, or the pack was faulty from the start. So batteries in EVs are split into modules. So you don't just have one massive pack of battery. It's not just it's loads of individual batteries separated into cells. And those cells can then be broken up into smaller parts. So there's a company called PowerVault, which break up electric car batteries, mainly from Renault Zoes, old Renault Zoes, and they turn them into home storage units for your house. So if you've got solar panels, instead of discharging back to the grid, you could charge. Well, in fact, now if you discharge to the grid, you don't get paid for it like you used to. There's no government subsidy any there, so there's no point exporting to the grid. You might as well buy a PowerVault storage battery, charge up the battery in your house, and then when there's no solar at night, your PowerVault battery will discharge back into your house. So they use new batteries because there's not enough supply of old second-hand batteries. But when they do get second-hand batteries from Renault Zoes, they will use them. But there is a massive shortage of second-hand EV batteries, so they're having to actually produce batteries just for this use. So that there is that. Regarding full recycling plants, there's so little failures. There's not really much of a business model for it. So the only places that are doing full recycles is the University of Birmingham. They're doing a lot of recycling, and RS Bruce Materials is also doing it. But then this leads me on to a second part about EV batteries. Is if they're working and it's come from a car that's had a bad car accident, a written off, a salvage car, for example, those type of cars, they want the batteries for, say, classic car conversions. because there's a lot of money in converting them
Okay.
into classic cars.
So you just chop them up and reuse them for a new.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Good. Well, there was a question from Ruth, and it was, do you know of any electric vans sort of suitable to replace the normal delivery vans? Because especially now, there's so many deliveries being done to homes. Is there an electric vans that are widely available?
Yes, so there's a couple. There's one from LDV, so big company LDV, everyone's heard of. There's a couple of vans from Renault. Big vans, they only do the traffic. They do a small van called a Kangoo. But at the moment, forgive me for being cynical, but there's no company like Tesla making vans. Therefore, most traditional car companies aren't really that interested in making vans, while they can still get rid of the diesel and petrol engines they make for them. This is changing. There's a lot more bringing in. There's Fiat bringing an electric van in this year. But I don't think in the manufacturing world there's a big appetite to enter the van market, while they can still get rid of the existing diesel vans they've got. But there is more coming in. There's the Nissan ENV200, which is another smaller van, but big vans. You've really only got the Traffic and the LDV that I can think of off the top of my head. There might be a couple more that I'm forgetting, but there is a Fiat one out later on this year.
So you think they could make them, but they're just not.
They could make them because there is a small issue, which is the weight capacity of the van. Obviously, you're removing the engine and you're putting batteries in, which are also heavy. But you need quite a lot more batteries, because when a van's fully loaded, it's heavier. Therefore, it needs more battery capacity. But the majority of van drivers don't tend to do long distances. They do tend to just be, doing jobs in their local area. For people like them, there's plenty of vans that they could switch to tomorrow. They'd save an absolute fortune. I know quite a few companies that have gone, even courier companies that have gone down that route. But there will be more. UPS, for example, and Amazon are buying Rivian trucks. So Rivian are actually like a truck. They make they're going to be making prestige vehicles. But Amazon bought into them, and they're going to make their own vans just for Amazon deliveries, because Amazon and UPS know exactly how far their fleet travels, so they know an EV van can fit their needs straight away. But I think there will be more of an appetite for EV vans, especially now, like you've got London congestion zones where, unless you've got a Euro 6, you're going to be paying high congestion rates. So you'll probably see a lot more appetite for them this year.
Yeah, there's a comment there from GCAM saying Mercedes are bringing out a Vito EV.
Oh,
so
right.
That'd be
Thanks
something
for that.
to look out for. That's a good question there from Michael Bell because you mentioned the Zoe, that you've got a Renault Zoe.
Yeah.
Saying, I have heard that you can upgrade the battery for one with a greater range. Do you know if this is true?
Oh, I'm the issue for that mistake. So on my channel, there's a video called "Upgrading Your Renault Zoe 22 kilowatt battery to 40." So it can be done, theoretically can be done. So in the early days, Renault in Europe did a thing where you could do it. So they charge you a set fee, and Renault would sell you the newer pack, the 40 kilowatt pack from the 22 kilowatt pack. You take your old 22 out and you'd fit the new 40, because they're the same size, same plugs, they're all interchangeable, and they just update the software. Renault stopped that beta program. They just did it to see if it was possible, but they don't do it anymore. So the only way of doing it is if you owned the car outright. You own the car outright, and you physically found a secondhand 40 kilowatt battery and put it in, and then sold your old 22. So you can do it. You can't do the 22 and 40 to the 52, the new one, but the 22 can go to the 40. So you can upgrade the 22 to a bigger pack, but not officially. But unofficially, there's a couple of companies that can do it, and there's a couple of companies that have done it on Nissan Leafs. So the Nissan Leaf has a 24 kilowatt pack, and some people have upgraded it to the 30 kilowatt pack. So it can be It can be done in theory, but you can't do it officially. Say if you rang Renault up and said, can I have a bigger pack in it,
Okay,
please?"
okay, okay. A question from Annie Wood. This would be good for you, Nick. What is the market like for second-hand EVs for those who are not in a position to afford a brand new EV? How much would I expect to pay for an EV Zoe? That was
Oh, so it depends on what year you want, and it depends on what size battery you want, and it depends on what kind of mileage you're willing to go up to. So if you wanted, say, a 22 kilowatt battery and you're just looking for the cheapest one you can get on the market, I think you can buy 22 on about a 13, 14 plate for around about, I'm trying to think last time I looked, about £6,000 is for 22. 40s, you're going to be looking around about the 10, 12 mark, and they're what they call battery lease. So you own the car, but you lease the battery from Renault. So you pay a monthly subscription for the battery, but in that, they give you free breakdown, free recovery, even if you run out of charge. They also guarantee the battery's health will be above 75% at all times. If it ever drops below 75% state of health, they fit you a new pack. So all the labour cost involved with that. So if you don't want to believe me that batteries last and you want that peace of mind of the battery lasting forever, then you can rent the battery from Renault. And if it fails, Renault will cover the cost. So, you can do that. And Renault are doing a buyout program of the battery lease where you'll be able to purchase the battery lease off them and own the car outright if you wanted. But at the
okay.
moment, the cheapest way of doing it is battery leasing.
Yeah, so the question from Michael, he's saying the one about can he upgrade your battery? He rents the battery at the moment, so he would have to buy it off Renault effectively, and then maybe
Yes.
change
So
it out if he wanted to.
Yes, we'd have to buy it twice. We'd have to buy the battery, the 22 kilowatt battery he owns, then sell that 22 kilowatt battery himself and buy a new 40 kilowatt battery. But you'd probably find there's a rush of people wanting to buy that 22 kilowatt battery either for home storage or because they've got a salvaged electric car EV, or even because they want to convert an old classic Volkswagen Beetle to a full electric. Because there's a lot of people converting cars now, a lot.
Okay, interesting. What's on here? So there's a question which sort of maybe relates to the vans. There's two questions here, one on the chat and one which is about hydrogen. So one saying, what about hydrogen vans? And the question that's from Andrew Melville, and the question from Helen was similar. Should we think about hydrogen as well as electric vehicles?
Hydrogen should be safe for rockets in my mind. It's the only form I can see hydrogen being useful for is sending stuff to space. Hydrogen has multiple issues. So number one, storage of hydrogen. It's more explosive than petrol, and it has to be stored under. It has to be compressed, so it's stored under pressure, constant pressure. So not only have you got a highly flammable substance, but it's also stored under pressure. So you can imagine how sort of volatile it is, pressure, and also the fact that it can be ignited with pretty much anything. The other problem is hydrogen car is actually an electric car with a power station on board. So it has a battery and it has a motor, just like an electric car. And then you have a power station converting the hydrogen to electricity, which then charges the battery, which then runs the electric motor. So what you're doing is you're just creating an extra load of parts to go wrong and adding more cost. But what you're also doing, which really annoys me about hydrogen, is you're also keeping the fuel industry going, because the hydrogen's concept and everyone's promise of hydrogen was going to be better than EVs was all started by major fuel corporations. There's a documentary series on well, not a documentary, it's a film. There's a film on YouTube. You have to pay for it. I think it's about £2.50, £3, called Who Killed the Electric Car. And if you haven't seen it, watch it. It is the most phenomenal thing I've ever seen. And Who Killed the Electric Car is all about how hydrogen's it's only 5 years away. And the biggest investors in hydrogen were the petrol industry, because if they can still sell you a product that you have to buy and purchase from a forecourt. You can't make hydrogen yourself at home, or you can't make it very easily at home. Where electricity, you can make that at home. You can have a wind turbine, you can have solar panels, you can make electricity at home, so you're cutting out that whole thing. That hydrogen for me,
Yeah.
you're creating an extra problem by having an extra form of storage. You're also having to still go to a forecourt and buy it, and not only that, it's not much quicker than filling up an electric car, because once, let's say someone uses a hydrogen pump and they fill up
Yeah.
their car with hydrogen and then they drive away, those stations then have to repressurize the tank, and that can take 7 minutes.
Okay.
And then it's going to take you 5 minutes to fill it. So you're only going to spend 15, 20 minutes there. Most EVs can charge from 0 to 80% in 35 minutes, and the new charging stations are even faster. And you won't even need half the time a full charge. You might only need a 20-minute boost. And the new chargers can do, some of the new chargers are 350 kilowatts in speed, and my car is capable of 43. So it gives you an idea of what kind of leaps we're going in charging speeds.
Okay. So you're saying even though maybe hydrogen has more power per you
It's
have to add
also
in all this extra stuff to make it work in your car.
it's also from an environmental concept. It's not very green, because you need to make hydrogen which uses electricity. Okay, so you can make hydrogen using renewable sources, but the losses incurred in storing it into hydrogen are greater than if you just put it straight into an electric car. There's no because instead of making the hydrogen then reconverting it, you're just putting it straight into the EV battery straight away, rather than turning it into hydrogen, then into an EV battery, then into a motor. So you're getting less losses.
Okay.
So it's also a lot cheaper in the long run. To me, hydrogens make no sense. Even for planes are going to go full electric. Trucks are going full electric. You can see that there's two companies that are really investing in trucks. Well, in fact, no, there's three. There's Nicolas and Tesla. There's one called, is it Nicolas? I can't remember the name of it now. There's one around that kind of name. There's Tesla, and then there's Rivian. They're all interested in making trucks, because that's the next progression. And truck companies will just look at how far the truck goes, and they know exactly what their fleet does. And again, the trucks will be charging at very high speeds, 350 kilowatts of power going into those batteries at high speed. And not only that, trucks have to legally stop after so many hours anyway, so they might as well stop and charge. So it won't really matter.
So there was a second bit on that question.
Nicolas Motors, someone's just said it for me.
Okay, Nicolas Motors. Okay, which was about, well, if batteries are dependent on resource extraction and labor and things like that, so that's obviously a problem with lots and lots of batteries getting made. But what you're saying is hydrogen also has problems in its production. They've both got problems, it seems like.
You've still got to make the electric car to have a hydrogen car. So you're not changing any of the process. You're still making exactly the same thing. So you have to make an electric car to make a hydrogen car, because it still has the battery and it still has the motor. So you're just creating extra processes when you could just put it straight in the car. A hydrogen car is just an electric car which is converting the hydrogen on board, but it still has to charge that battery before it goes into the motor.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, I won't be getting a hydrogen car anytime soon. There was a question earlier from Robin Edwards about how do you explain all the different plugs and sockets and charging things, and do you need to know about it if you're buying an electric car?
No. No. So the only thing you need to know is when you're getting an EV is you just need to buy. So in the UK, there's a couple of plugs. So I'll go through them all. There's Type 1, okay, which is on very, very first early Nissan Leafs. Then you've also got Type 2, which is the current standard. So all cars now in the EU have to have a Type 2 plug-on. They've got no choice. They've all got to have a Type 2 plug. So if you buy an electric car today, it will have a Type 2 plug-on. Even the newer Nissan Leafs have Type 2 plugs on. Then you've got two forms of rapid chargers. So you've got what they call CCS, which is a combination charger. So it uses Type 2 at the top. So it's a Type 2 plug at the top. And then at the very bottom, it's got two big pins at the bottom, which is your DC power. And all the newer cars now will have a Type 2 with CCS at the bottom. And then you've also got another fast charging standard, which is called CHAdeMO. And the only company in the UK that's currently still using that from last time I checked was Nissan. So on a Nissan, you have a Type 2 plug and a CHAdeMO plug. And really, the reason you don't need to think about it is even if you've got an early Type 1 Nissan Leaf, very, 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 very early plug, and you go to a public charger, you'll either A, use the CHAdeMO for your fast charging, which all the chargers have on, or you'll be plugging into a public charger which uses a cable in your car, which plugs into Type 1, but on the other end of a public charger, it always has a Type 2. So the cable that comes with your early first grade Nissan Leaf will be Type 1 for you on your car end, but your other end will have a Type 2. So you'll always be able to use a public charger, even with the very old ones. But all EV, if you buy a brand new EV today, it will be Type 2 for the foreseeable future.
So you just don't need to worry about it, basically.
You really don't need to worry about it. If you've ever seen kids when they put like blocks into like square holes and stuff and it doesn't fit, that's all a charger's like. You get to a charger, the one that fits in your plug is the one that's going to work.
Okay. There's a comment there from Senna007 saying, you and McTurk did a great video on charger cable types. So I guess if you do have any questions, you can check that out.
Yeah, and I'm doing Ewan's a live guest on my other channel later on tonight. So I do another YouTube channel called EV Lounge Live, which is me, a guy called Martin, and Craig, two good friends of mine in the EV industry. And then we've got a special guest tonight, which is Ewan, who's going to be talking about how to store your EV battery during COVID-19. But Ewan's a really, really, really clever bloke. But I've got some videos coming on charging cables due. I was going to release them in the next sort of 2-3 weeks. So if you keep an eye on my YouTube channel, you'll see them appear at some point. And I'm physically holding. Unfortunately, I haven't got any cables in my room to show you, but I'm going through all the cables, all the pictures. But it sounds more complicated than it actually is. Mm-hmm. Once you started using it, it'll make perfect sense.
Good to know. There's a question here from Philip Griffiths saying, I often drive from Bollington to France, just south of Paris, maybe 650 miles. How difficult would this be with a 22 kilowatt hour and a 40 kilowatt hour battery Zoe? Probably his price range.
It wouldn't be difficult. I live not far away from Bollington. Bollington is, to give you an idea where I am, I'm in Derbyshire. So my family business, where I'm currently furloughed for, while this is all going on, is Luigi Motors in Disley. So it gives you an idea how close I am to Bollington. So I'm just in sort of Disley round the corner. I've driven from here to Belgium. So Belgium's a bit further than France. We did that in a 40 kilowatt car. I've also done Frankfurt in a bigger Jaguar I-Pace, and we did that all the way non-stop. But drove to Belgium. So if I can do Belgium, it's quite easy. If you're going via the Eurotunnel, for example, because then you're doing full electric, you're not using any diesel boats on the way. Using a nice electric train through the Channel Tunnel, which is more preferred. The Channel Tunnel's got a charger at the tunnel entrance, so you have to charge on the British side if you're going over to France, and then when you're going from France over to the British side, you charge on the French side. So you just charge on the country you're going from. So you could drive all the way. 22 kilowatt would be a lot harder, but more than possible. But a 40 kilowatt battery, if you drive it steady in the summer, will get about 170 miles to a charge. So you'd have to stop a couple of times, but yeah, more than possible. And to be honest, if you're doing that kind of driving down to say Folkestone, you're going to want to stop a couple of times anyway.
So you've got the 40 kilowatt hour, is that right?
I've got the 22.
Right, okay.
But I drove my 22 to Craig's, which is my friend's house, and then he drove in his 40. So we actually stopped more because I had to stop to get to his. He lives in Coventry, so you're not talking too much distance.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, his house is about 90 miles from me. So if you had an extra 15-minute stop on, for example, 20-minute stop, but you'd be leaving your house with a full charge. If you were leaving Bollington, you'd be leaving with a full charge. You'd have 150 miles. You'd already have been further down than what I was when I stopped at his.
Sounds definitely doable. Just looking at the questions here, some good comments answering some of these questions, saying, for example, Dale Vince is good at answering queries about EVs and infrastructure. Put a link to Plug Life on there. One of the questions that we've had is 15 years too long to wait for a ban on a combustion engine? Which is referring to, I guess, the 2035 ban here in Britain.
Sorry, say that again. Is it 15 years too long to
wait? So should that be brought forward? Do you think that's
well, it's already been brought slightly forward. So it was originally 20 years. Would have been 20 years. It would have been 2040 ban. So now it's 2035 ban. It's not. The thing with the government ban is it's not going to change public opinion. I think public opinion is going to move much, much faster than 15 years. If you think as you're approaching that 15-year ban, would you want to buy a petrol or diesel car 2 years before that ban came in, knowing that theoretically your car in 4 or 5 years when you come to sell it is going to be worth a hell of a lot less because very few people are going to want to buy it. I mean, you're seeing that now. For example, my Renault Zoe, when I bought it 3 years ago, it would have retailed. I would have paid for it from a dealer about $5,000. Today, that same car with 20,000 miles more on it and 3 years older would sell for at a dealer for $8,000. It's gone up in value because the demand has increased. Where petrol cars have only gone one way, and that's down in price. So as demand's increasing, and you're seeing that demand even more. And the thing with that 15-year ban is that demand for EVs is going up. Now, if you're a Volkswagen, if you're one of the traditional car makers, and your demand for your petrol and diesel car is plummeting, and people like Tesla that only sell electric cars have suddenly rose to the top of the highest selling figures for March. For the first quarter of this month, Tesla's sales are in the top 10. So if you're a traditional automaker, you're losing sales because you're not making enough electric cars. What are you going to do? You're going to stop selling your petrol cars and start making electric cars. So you'll notice that shift will move very, very quickly because they don't want to lose out on those sales.
So if that's the case, when most people have a petrol or diesel, when are the price of those? When should you get rid of it, or should we wait for a scrappage scheme to come in?
I don't think a scrappage scheme will ever happen because when the ban comes in, you'll still be able to drive your petrol and diesel cars. The ban's only on new cars. So when the ban comes in, you won't be able to buy a brand new petrol car. You won't be able to buy a brand new diesel car. You'll still be able to drive your old car for as long as it will, carry on working and is serviceable or repairable. But you won't be able to buy a new one anymore. So you've got to think is if you bought a car on 2035, you bought the last petrol car able to be sold, what's your car going to be worth in 4 years' time? Nothing. The government aren't going to offer you an incentive scheme to scrap your old petrol diesel car because it'll still work and you'll still be able to use it. They're not banning you from using it, but the initiative is in your court to get rid of it rather than theirs.
There's a question there. Will that ban apply to trucks from Pork on Fork?
I believe it's for all vehicles, but I need to double check. And I know the previous ban, 2040 ban, was for the ban was allowed hybrid cars that did over so many miles electric. Now it can't even be hybrid; it has to be full electric from 2035. But I'll have to. I'm presuming it is on trucks as well, but I am not a truck expert, so I don't know. Cars are my expertise, not trucks.
We talked a bit about this at the beginning, but there's been a few more questions about charging if you don't have private parking, and how quickly charging infrastructure is going to come about. I just want to recap on that. I think particularly you mentioned the hubs and things like that. Is that something that there's a
Yeah,
plan for?
I, I think more private companies will be the reason why you get you'll see more charges. So, for example, Tesco, pretty much all Tesco, I think it's extra stores are going to have charges outside, and that's partnership with Volkswagen. So they're a company called Podpoint. So they're fitting chargers at all the Tesco's, and to use those chargers, it's free. There's no charge. And you might ask me, oh, why would Tesco give away free electricity, for you to use their
Mm,
chargers? And the reason is, where are you going to shop? Are you going to shop at Sainsbury's, where you just drive in, do your shopping, and drive out, or are you going to shop at Tesco, where you can do your shopping, but while you're shopping, you can have a full tank of electricity completely for free? And that's what's going to happen. More of these private companies like Tesco, Lidl are doing it. They're all going to offer charging at their forecourts, their places of business. So don't think of charging your electric car the same as a
hmm
petrol car. You need to think of it more as if you're a cow and you're grazing on a field. So you'll pick up oh you'll pick up 20, 30 miles while you do your shopping at Tesco. You might pick up 10 miles while you go to a shopping centre. You might pick up 50 miles when you go to the Trafford Centre, for example. You'll be grazing at
hmm
shopping centres, petrol stations. There will be fast charge at petrol stations. They're
hmm
coming. So BP are going to be fitting super rapid charge to all their forecourts, which are 150 kilowatt chargers. So they'll be fitted to all BP stations. Every single one of them is going to have them, and all the other petrol stations are going to obviously follow
Yeah,
suit. So you will be able to have a quick blast of extra electrons, but what you'll probably find is, rather than paying for those electrons at a premium price at a forecourt for a rapid charge, you might find that you'll prefer to charge slowly at
yeah,
Tesco completely for free, just because you went
yeah.
shopping there.
Pat Bell had a quite. You mentioned pod points. Pat Bell says a lot of retail outlets are offering pod points, but they charge at such a slow rate that they are of limited benefit. Do you think they will be replaced with rapid chargers in the future?
No, because most pod points are at places they want to be slow, so you spend longer at the place. So, for example, Chester Zoo, they have slow chargers. What if you go to Chester Zoo? You don't want to charge your EV in 20 minutes, because you're going to be there for 4 hours. So you want slow chargers are ideal, but they need to be put in the right. For example, you won't put a slow charger at a motorway service
Mm,
station, because if you go into a motorway service station, you want to spend 5 to 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, and go. If you go to a petrol station forecourt, you want to spend very limited time there and go. But if you're going to Chester Zoo, you're going to Tesco, you're going to Lidl shopping. If you go into a supermarket, it can be slow, because you don't want to spend 5-6 hours there. You only want to spend, you're going to be spending longer time there. You don't want to be, you're not going to be gone after 15
mm,
minutes. The last thing you want to do is have a fast charger at, say, Chester Zoo, where you're going to spend 5 hours, and your car's charged in 25 minutes, and you're having to go back out to your car to move it, so you're not blocking the charger that someone else can't
yeah,
use.
yeah.
It makes much, and not only that, those fast power chargers cost a lot more money. So those fast power
Mm,
chargers, with the infrastructure and everything that has to go into, cost about £15,000 to install per unit. Where the slower chargers, you could install 20 of them for that. So would you rather have one fast charger at Tesco or 20 slow
yeah,
ones?
that makes sense. Andrew Melville's got a question here. Same subject. Um, on motorway service stations, are the electric chargers powered by diesel or petrol generators?
Oh, sorry. Say that.
So
Say that
you're
one again.
saying if you're going to a service station, they've got a charger there on the motorway. Is that charger being powered by a diesel or petrol generator to get the?
No, they're all grid. They're all grid connected. So all petrol stations forecourts are grid
Okay.
connected. All motorway service stations are grid connected, and you'll probably notice that a lot of service stations now, because they have a lot of dead roof space, a lot of service stations I've been going to have got solar panels fitted on the service stations. So they'll also be pulling off that. But all petrol stations are grid connected. All petrol stations that I've seen are grid connected, and all the ones you see Tesla chargers at, for example, Tesla chargers tend to also have some on-site battery backup as well to sort of help balance and load balance the grid. So there's not like a massive demand on grids. But sometimes when you see service stations and they've only got, say, 1 or 2 chargers, the reason they've only got 1 or 2 chargers and not 6, it can be 2 reasons. One, it might be there's not enough demand at that petrol station and therefore they don't need to fit 6. But the other reason is there might not be enough grid capacity to handle 6 chargers, so they've only fitted 2. So in a lot of the places like motorway service stations, it might actually be the grid's not up to coping with more chargers, and that will come. But what you'll probably find is that they might find that installing solar panels on top of the service station and then fitting a couple of backup battery power stations will also bridge that gap, so they don't need to sort of worry too much.
So on the chargers in general, so what you're saying is generally we're not going to be able to rely on the council or something like that to bring in chargers. We should be looking to the supermarkets, service stations for these chargers to appear.
Partly yes and partly no. So councils have a responsibility, in my mind, to fit them to council-owned car parks. But I don't think in a council-owned car park, which are around shopping areas, that there need to be fast chargers. I think slow chargers are fine. What we call 7 kilowatt chargers. So chargers you get at your house, not particularly quick, not particularly slow, and add enough mileage into your car. They can do that. They could fit one rapid charger, but most councils want to attract more people to come to the area, park in the local council car parks, and shop locally. So they'd be more incentivized to fit slow chargers. But if they could fit a couple of rapids dotted around, then I think Macclesfield Council really should be fitting one locally, because it encourages people to drive through the area. In my mind. But you'll probably find that private companies are much more willing to do it, because I think I was saying to you before we started this live chat, would you rather go, if you were an electric car driver, would you rather go for a drink at a local pub that has a charger that's free to use when you have a meal there, or go to a pub around the corner that doesn't have any, charging facilities? You're more likely as an EV driver to go to the one with a charger. So if you're a business, it makes beneficial sense for you to install a charger, because more people are likely to come to your business and spend money at your business. And the actual cost of electricity to you is peanuts. It doesn't really cost you anything in the grand scheme of things. It's very, very, very minimal for the amount of money that said person may spend at your business. I mean, obviously, if they were just drinking a couple of pints of beer, then you might lose a bit of business. But how often are people just going to drive to your business every day just to drink 2 pints of beer? They might come to your business and buy a big meal, or buy some item of clothing or some gifts or something like that. But businesses are much more likely to do it. That's why Tesco are doing it, because it's not because that they want to be green, although that's that will have some sort of input to it, that they do want to be more green. But it's business sense. It makes them money. You're more likely to come to them.
I mean, in Bollington, the only public charger I know of is actually at a pub, the Crown.
Yes. It's the only one that came up when I had a quick look before we did this.
And it's a Tesla, but I'm not sure if you can only use a Tesla or not. I don't.
No, so it's a public. Anyone can use it, but there'll be 2 chargers there, I believe.
Yeah, there is. Right? There's 2. Yeah.
So there'll be one with a red sign, one with a white sign, and I can't remember which way around it is, but someone in the chat will definitely know. But I think it's the red sign. Only Teslas can charge at, and white signs any car can charge at, and it's just locked in the software. But a lot of pub landlords, what they've done is they opened up the Tesla charger, and inside there's a little dimple switch that you can flick, and then it works on all cars.
Okay.
But it's the same plug. It's it's a Type 2 plug, but the cable's built into the charger, so it won't work on the early Nissan Leafs without an adapter. But all cars that aren't early Nissan Leafs will just plug straight into. But they tend to be, the Tesla chargers tend to be 7 kilowatt or 22 kilowatt, and I wouldn't know what that one is without looking at it. But the 22 kilowatts, the only cars that can charge at that speed on those type of chargers is Renault Zoes and Teslas.
Good to know.
Nick, what do you think of petrol station forecourt canopies? Is it canopies? Don't have solar panels on them. Should they be made to do this? Um, I don't think you need to make them. I think it'll make absolute sense for them to do it financially, especially if they're selling electricity in the form of EV charging. So I do think they will go that way, not because we make them, but because it makes financial sense. I think a lot of things like buying an electric car, fitting solar panels, grid batteries, people often do them not because they want to be green, but because it saves them money, and money does tend to motivate a lot more people a lot quicker. Which, especially if you're a company, and if they weren't if the financial incentive wasn't there, then yes, I think that you should bring laws in to force them. But when the actual financial benefit is for them there, I don't think you need to force them. I think most of them will naturally tend to do it. But the problem is most petrol station canopies tend to be flat, and you kind of want solar panels to be angled to face the sun. I can't remember the exact angle that it has to be at, but I'm sure someone in the chat will go, "Oh, it's got to be at a 27-degree angle or something daft." But there's an exact angle that gets the most solar, and the more your roof's got a pitch to that, the better it is.
Just not north, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, you can have north, and you can have east, and you can have west arrays. There's a video on my channel called "Building an Eco House," where I did an interview with Dean Fielding, who's a builder, and he said actually, in some respects, having an east and west array makes more sense because the south array only generates electricity when you're not in the house because you're at work during the middle of the day. But in the east and west arrays, when you wake up in the morning, so you're turning your kettle on, and when you're coming home from work, charging your car and putting your kettle on and turning your oven on. So actually, an east and west array for selfish reasons is actually more beneficial than a south array. South array only benefits the grid, doesn't really benefit you unless you work from home, which a lot more people are likely to probably be doing in the next couple of weeks and foreseeable future, as people probably realise that working from home actually does have a lot more benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. A question there: how long before Ecotricity's monopoly at motorway service stations has ended? I mean, whenever I've driven into one, I've only ever noticed Ecotricity chargers.
I don't think it really matters because a lot of most of the charging companies aren't really that interested in having the chargers at motorway service stations because they have to pay a very high fee to the owner of the motorway service station. And the way motorway service contracts are made is you couldn't have two companies competing for chargers. That's not the way the contracts are sold. They're sold as exclusive contracts. So petrol stations, they're sold as, you never see two petrol stations at a service station, for example, and because they're sold on exclusive rights. So most other companies won't want to do it. And the company called Polar, for example, if you notice down a motorway, Polar always fit chargers near motorway exits. And the reason is it's just as easy to get off motorway exit number 27 than get off at the next exit, which happens to be a service station. So yes, your brain tends to draw you towards service stations, but if you want to avoid ecotricity, then just when you're doing your charge planning, just look at the Polar chargers that are near the exits where you want to stop. I've never had any problems with ecotricity personally. They've worked every single time I've ever plugged into them. 9 times out of 10, I've never paid for them because they tend to be on what they call free vend, which is where it's not communicating with the ecotricity server, so it doesn't charge you for electricity. It's just free. So half the time I've not paid for it. So I literally cannot say a bad word about ecotricity. But if you're really that bothered about not wanting to use them, then just have a look, and you often find that most holiday inns that are next to the motorway tend to have Polar chargers there.
So the government, going back to the charging points and the grants for councils. So if we wanted to get some, let's say, slow chargers at the main council car park in Bollington, how do we go about that, and how long do you think it would take to get them in?
I don't really get involved too much at a council level because last time I tried to get involved with High Peak Council, for example, and asked to speak to someone about fitting chargers, the guy told me he's waiting for government to legislise when they're going to fit hydrogen chargers. And when I explained to him the government's plan was to go full electric, it just turned into a big argument. So I never got anywhere with them. So I tended to give up and then go for. I tended to focus more of my efforts on private companies that, when you explain to them how much money they'd make on the extra business when they fitted a charger, they went, yeah, of course we'll fit one straight away. So you're probably better speaking to someone else on really forcing the council. But a lot of councils should. High Peak now are fitting chargers. They're fitting one in Whaley Bridge, for example. So kind of not that far away from you guys in Bollington. So Whaley Bridge is having a rapid charger fitted. And that's part of the D2N2 fund. So that's like a central fund for councils in sort of like this area that they can apply to that pot. And that pot helps with dealing with the application to central government to get the money, and also has some other funding from all the other councils invested into it. So you're probably better maybe getting Cheshire East with your local council, Bollington Council, and surrounding councils to set up a central fund that they all work together to help distribute and apply for that money. What you often find is most councils don't have anyone specifically whose job is installing chargers. So you normally have to go to the road and lighting department, and they're usually in charge of it. So road and lighting is the department that you want to ask for. They're usually the department that will be overseeing chargers.
Okay. So the plug seekers just commented saying big charger companies are making agreements with chains like Engini, Marstopes, Polar and Holiday and Marston's. That is the pub. So yeah.
Engini fit. I've been fitting chargers to all Marston pubs, and they're actually rapid chargers, believe it or not. Which weirdly wouldn't actually benefit the pub too much. But then I suppose if you were there, you might just pop in for a quick drink because you're still paying for the charge. The Marston ones, you pay for the electricity. So the fit. What they do is like a revenue scheme share, where they'll fit the charger at the site, and Marston's will give the land for 15 years, and they'll share the revenue what's made off that charger.
Okay.
I mean, that's the other thing to note to councils is they're making money from selling car parking spaces, for you to park on car parks that the council own. But they could also be making money out of selling your fuel, essentially, while you're parked there. And they need to look at that as a long-term investment, that it's going to be something they're going to make money out of.
Okay, so I mean, I think we're getting close to the end, but there's a question here which might be a can of worms. John Peake, can you explain vehicle to grid?
Yes. Vehicle power going to the grid. There we go. I'm only messing. So yeah, vehicle to grid. So you got vehicle to grid and vehicle to home. So electric cars are just a big battery, a big battery. So most EVs now have a minimum of what they call a 40 kilowatt hour battery. Some have got even bigger batteries, 100 kilowatt hour batteries. And what you can do is you can plug your car in to the charger at your home, and it will fill up your car. So it'll fill your car up with electricity. And what you tend to want to do is you want to fill it up when it's cheaper. So power on the grid can fluctuate all the way throughout the day. And you can charge at lower rates on different tariffs. So there's a company in the links that you've got there at the bottom, Mark, called Octopus Energy. Octopus Energy have a tariff called Agile. And if I go on Agile today, I bet you there is what we call negative electricity, which is where they pay you to charge your car. So you can charge your car off the grid. In fact, here we go. So right now, I can charge my EV on Agile for 5p. So 5 pence per kilowatt hour. But then later on in the day, I might be able to sell it back to the grid at 25p, because obviously as you get towards peak times, so your peak times in the UK tend to be between 4 and about 8 o'clock, you might be able to sell it back to the grid for 25p. So you've charged at 5p, but then you're selling it back at 25p, so you can make 20p. And you can do that using vehicle to grid. So rather than having a storage battery in your house. You could have your car as a storage battery. You could charge your car from that storage battery and sell it back to the grid. But you can also do what they call vehicle to home. And vehicle to home, very similar to the grid, but instead of selling it back to the grid, you're selling it back to yourself. So you charge your car at, say, work or some solar panels at work or somewhere else. And then you'd come home and you'd put it back in your house at 7 or 8 o'clock when you're cooking your tea. So you can do vehicle to grid and vehicle to home. The same similar technology, basically, it's the same thing, but charges for your cable and sells it back. At the moment, the only car that's sold that can definitely do it and is doing it is the Nissan Leaf, but all cars will eventually be able to do it. You're still on mute, Matt. There we
You can
go.
tell it's the first time I've done this yet, so there we go. So the GCAM says his agile rate right now is 1.7 pence per kilowatt hour, which I guess is...
Right. It depends where, with Agile, it depends where you are in the country. So everywhere in the country has a different rate at a different time. It depends on what your local demand on your grid is. That link that Matt's posted for Octopus Energy, if anyone signed up to that link, for example, it'll only show you the basic tariffs. It won't show you Octopus Go, which is 5p electric between 12:30 and 4:30, and it won't show you Agile. But if you sign up using that link, you'll get 50 quid credit for joining. And I get 50 quid as well. That is like a referral scheme. So we both get 50 quid for joining. And then once you get a smart meter installed, it has to be a SMET 2 meter or a meter branded secure. You can move to their company, which is called, you can move to their smart tariffs. One's called Agile and one's called Octopus Go. And those two tariffs allow cheaper electricity. Agile changes every 30 minutes. And if you like playing the game of trying to get cheap electricity, it's a great way to go. But if you just want set 4 hours of cheap electricity, I'm on Octopus Go, for example. So every 12:30 to 4:30, I get 5p electricity, and then all the other times it's 14p. So it means I can charge my car at home for 5 pence a kilowatt hour, which it means the running cost on it is super, super cheap. Have we got any more questions from Transition Bollington in the list there, Matt?
Yeah, let's have a look. I think we've covered most of them. One is, well, what's the cost per mile of electric car compared to diesel petrol, which I guess comes into this.
Yeah, so very similar to what I've just said there, which is it depends what you're paying at home for your electricity. So the easy at the moment, let's have a look, because I've got a little app on my phone which tells me what my car is running at compared to what I'm paying for electricity. So at the current moment, my cost per mile for my electric car is 1.2 pence per mile. So less than 2p, slightly more than a penny, and I'm charging at 5 pence per kilowatt hour. So if you were charging on some of the cheaper rates that Agile hit, which GCAM's just put 1.76 pence per kilowatt hour, you basically could run for less than a penny. So to put that in perspective, your very, very efficient petrol cars are close to sort of, I think, about 18, 19p per mile. So a lot cheaper. But then it's not just the running cost of the physical car; it's also the general running cost of the car. So there's no oil changes. There's no oil, so there's no oil to change. There's no fuel filters, and there's also environmentally wise, there's a lot of waste there. Oil's is a waste. Oil filters, they're waste. That they're wrapped in plastic when they arrive. So it's a lot. There's a lot of waste there just on getting that part to you. Then you're taking the old one out, and some companies recycle it. I'm sure some scrupulous garages just chuck them away and forget about them, or but they are essentially waste. Where electric cars don't have that. You also got no exhaust. I mean, you think about how many people change their exhaust, but then the other main thing is brakes. So your brake discs, your brake pads on electric cars last longer because all electric cars regenerate power. So when you let go of your accelerator, instead of the brake power using your brake discs, it uses regenerative power. So it recharges the battery, so you get miles back, but it also slows your car down. So you use less brakes and less brake discs. So most electric car drivers have never never changed the brake discs or pads.
Wow.
I
mean,
know someone who did. I know someone who's done it, and they've done 120,000 miles, and they've just changed the first set of brake discs and pads.
well, Ruth Toms has put a comment saying it costs her an average of £4 per month, and she drives 7,000 miles per year. Now, I've just done a quick calculation, so that's about, let's say, 580 miles a month, which is less than a pence per mile. And then GCAM says his old Land Rover Discovery was £1 per mile. So it's quite a big difference, £1 and 1 pence.
What's Ruth got?
I think Ruth's got a Zoe.
Ah, right. Okay, yeah. So she's in an EV. You
Yeah.
made me very worried there, Matt. I thought Ruth's been making her own petrol or diesel somewhere.
No,
Yeah,
Ruth's part of Transition Bollington, so yeah, she's got a Zoe already.
Yeah. So Zoe. Yeah, all EVs are very cheap to run. I mean, an old Land Rover is going to be a bit heavy on fuel, but some of the very, very, very modern petrol cars, I think, are getting towards sort of 30, 40p. That they're in the pence rather than in the pounds. But still, it's a huge, huge difference.
Okay. What's the cheapest electric car I can buy that's decent?
The cheapest electric cars on the market are the Renault Zoe and the Nissan Leaf. But you know that if you want a cheap electric car, there's a car called an iMEV, but you've got to be very devoted to wanting to drive green and not do many miles because they're very small batteries and they're not the most luxurious. And to be honest, I wouldn't drive one. I just don't like the look of them. I think they're a bit boxy. But I know people who've had them and absolutely love them. But they're only doing very small mileage. I have two electric cars. I've got a BMW i3 and the Zoe, and only until recently I've had two. Before I only had one car, which was the Zoe, and that was our main car. That was our only family car, 22 kilowatt Zoe, and we did all our journeys in that. So it depends what you want and what your budget is. So I can't really answer what's the cheapest because it depends. Everyone's got different budgets. Someone's cheap might be 7-8 grand, which is where the Zoes fall in and the Nissan Leafs fall in. But you know, your cheap decent might mean 20 grand. So it depends on what your budget is. But you can usually have a quick look around and see what there is. Oliver's just suggested the E-Up, but the E-Ups do fantastic money. Last time I looked in the auction, I think Matt's dropped out, so he'll probably be back in a bit. But the E-Up is one of these very weird cars that it makes a lot of money for what it is. So I particularly say the Zoe out of the two cars, I'd go for the Renault Zoe rather than that. And I think Matt is back. Are we back? Are you back with us, Matt?
Yeah, I just nip for a cup of tea.
You went into self-isolation, did you?
Yeah, that's right. Plug Seeker said you can also buy a Twizy, or Oliver Dawson says the E-Up.
Yeah, I was just covering that while you're gone. And the Twizy, okay. Mr. Plug Seeker's having a bit of a laugh with you there. The Twizy is a two-seater electric car with windows are in extra, and so are doors.
Okay, so not that good for Bollington then, yeah.
Yeah, he's just trying to wind you up. Okay. But there's a lot of EVs coming on the market at the moment. And I think you should have a look. The Nissan Leaf's a very nice car. It's a bit bigger than the Zoe if you've got a full family, but the Zoe's a bigger car than it looks. It's a bit of a TARDIS. It's actually boot wise, you can fit more in the Zoe than you can in a Nissan Leaf. But people would be more comfortable in the Nissan Leaf than the Zoe. Say you had 4 people in it. So they're very different cars, but the Zoe. I'm a bit of a fan of the Zoe, with it being my first electric car, but also I just think it's very good value for money. And I'm sure Ruth also agrees with me as well.
Yeah, I'm sure she does. So there's a couple of comments there. One, the MG ZS EV, great value, from
Yeah,
GCAN?
so that's SUV that's just come out from
Hmm.
MG. MG is not British anymore; it's Chinese.
Hmm.
But there's a MG SUV. It's brand new, starting price. I think it's 21, 22 grand, brand new. Um, and to IPCC, who's just said the G Wiz, he said decent. And again, the G Wiz is one of those cars that you've got to be fairly devoted to being an EV driver to go for.
Interesting.
Mr. Snowman, due to the small distance to and from work, my Clio gives me 24 miles per gallon. Uh, wait, Waiting for the windows to defrost in the winter is the killer. Starting a few minutes each morning and night. So to get here's a little thing that people won't know unless they've had an EV before. So the greatest thing about electric cars is you can just get your phone in the morning on a frosty morning, press a button, and it will defrost all your windows without you leaving the house because they're electric. You don't need to start the engine; it just starts the heater inside the car for you. Or rather than go on the app, what you can do is just say 7 o'clock tomorrow morning when I'm driving to work, defrost the windows, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, your car will automatically be defrosted. It's all automated.
That sounds pretty good to me. Uh, the one question: are you interested in the VW ID3 from Paul Munger?
I saw the VWI3 when I went to Frankfurt. So I've just been to Frankfurt last year to the motor show when I saw the VWI3. It's a very, very nice car, but it's not for me. I want something. Me and my wife are probably going to start a family next year, so I want something a bit bigger. So I'm going to be looking at something saloon or SUV. There's two cars that are on the back of my head at the moment, but I'm not going to unveil what they are yet.
Okay.
Are we finished on questions, Matt? Are we ready to wrap this up?
I think so. One last one should be quick from IPCC. Says less than 11 years. I'd kill for that option in my car, which is the defrost. Do all EVs have that option of the automatic defrost?
Um, all EVs apart from the MG ZS EV for some weird reason. MG decided not to fit it to the UK version of the car. They will be fitting it. And it will. I believe they're going to fit it on later on this year. But 95% of EVs will have it. So Nissan Leafs have it on. Renault Zoes have it on. Just trying to think of something off the top of my head. All Teslas have it on. All the Kias, Hyundai's, they all have preheat systems on. But yeah, 95% of all EVs have it on, pretty much. And to the person who just said about the Ford Mach-E, there's a video on that where I saw it in London, but I didn't see it at the motor show. Right, so thank you very much, Matt. If you're interested in learning more about Transition Bollington and what they do in Bollington area, Matt will put a link in the chat and you can have a look at Transition Bollington. Thank you very much for joining this live chat this week. If you want to learn more about EVs and you're more interested, then there's a little subscribe button down below of YouTube. If you click subscribe, there's a little notification bell. If you click that, you'll be notified every time I do a video, or I might do another live like this later on in the week. I've also got another EV channel all about electric cars called EV Lounge Live. If you're interested in seeing another live chat and talking to me and my other co-host tonight, that'll be streaming tonight. We do it live at 7 o'clock. It's a 45-minute show comprising all about electric cars. We've got a guest expert on this week called Ewan McTuck, who's a battery chemist. And he'll be talking all things battery chemistry about stuff like that. So thank you very much for joining me, Matt. Thank you very much for reading my questions. Thank you for reappearing after your little trip to isolation.
No, I
Was there
appreciate that, Nick. Thanks from Transition Bollington for taking the time, because I mean, the same with us and all the transition groups around. I mean, the EVs is obviously a big part of reducing emissions in our local area. So yeah, definitely appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, thanks to everyone for joining us. Possibly see you later on in the week, maybe for another one of these, because I might just do one on my own and with a couple of questions. So if there is still more questions, there is another session tonight on EV Lounge Live, which is another channel I do. Check out the subscribe button down the bottom of this video. And I might see for another question and answer session next week on my own. Thanks very much for Matt, and thanks very much Transition Volunteering for inviting me to do this talk. And everyone, have a nice day. I hope you enjoy your Sunday and whatever you do, and stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.